Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and alongside me is Mac.
Good evening.
Unfortunately, Gio won't be joining us today, whether that's because of a particular result or not. There's no need to worry, guys. Mac and I are here to cover all of the action from match week 21 of the Premier League. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social medias, both on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is at @houseof_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. Lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. But yeah, let's get straight into it. Result of the weekend, Arsenal 3, Man U 2. It is a good evening to you, Mac. What a result to go with that performance. What were your overall thoughts for this game?
I thought it was an exciting game. I think from a neutral's perspective, it had almost everything that you're asking for. Both teams were coming out with the intent to win. They went about it in very different ways. I thought, obviously, one team was much more successful, not just in terms of course, the goal difference, but in terms of the overall performance, there was, for me, a clear echelon of levels. There's a tier. I think Arsenal were much better than Manchester United in the game. But because of individual moments, mistakes, moments of brilliance, the game ended up being very equal, very even, and created a fantastic atmosphere. You can, even watching it on TV, you can kind of hear the the fans in the Emirates. Kind of, you feel the vibe, the energy, which is sometimes historically the last couple of years for Arsenal, you don't really get the same type of intensity, that type of feeling. So you definitely felt like this was a big match, very important to everyone that was there, and the spectacle definitely matched that. What about you?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. It was, as a neutral, I guess you can say, very, very fun game to watch. And obviously, you mentioned it in our side chat that it was the complete opposite because there were goals and action compared to the game that took place on Saturday, which we'll touch later, with Chelsea and Liverpool, which ended 0-0. But this game had it all. Early goal for Man U, which we kind of thought was the best way for Man U to get a positive result in this game. But at the same time, like you said, Arsenal were better, and I think Arsenal were better on all fronts for this game, and it showed with their ability to come back. And so, honestly, another great performance by this Arsenal team that keeps, I think, impressing everyone so far this season. And Man U, they came in with a game plan, and it worked in a sense that the game was still tight, and even though Arsenal did dominate possession, Man U were never really, I guess, out of the game, and actually took towards the end of the game, which we'll talk about, for Arsenal to win it. So yeah, I guess let's get straight into it. I guess just wanted to bring up the Arsenal's lineup unchanged from their win against Spurs last weekend, which I think we kind of predicted. Man U, obviously, they were missing Casemiro, but they did start McTominay and Christian Eriksen behind Fernandes. Weghorst up top with Rashford and Antony on either side. And in defense, Lisandro Martinez came back on that left center-back position, and Shaw on that left side to essentially mark Saka, who honestly was probably his best game. What do you think, Mac? Do you think that would have been his best game?
I don't think it's his best game he's had. I think it's a statement performance from him, which definitely moves him into a different echelon. A lot of the eyes in the Arsenal team were going towards Nketiah, we're going towards the Odegaard, because it's really a by committee with them, where you, as long as 2 out of the 4 of the front 4 play well, they're going to have a good chance to play against win against any team. And in this game, 3 of them played very, very well. Martinelli probably wasn't as impactful as he would have wanted to be, but everyone else in that front 4 had moments where they looked very, very good. Saka looked unplayable. Luke Shaw, England teammates, probably had a lot of time in England defending against him one-on-one, and unfortunately didn't pick up any useful tips to really stop him, because Saka really did whatever he wanted on that right-hand side for Arsenal. And we're watching the game, is the double for Manchester United always came too late, and Saka was really able to pick who he wants to be able to stand up against. I know we're skipping towards the second half here, but in his goal, it ends up happening where Eriksen switches onto him, and that's who he wants. He's like, oh, okay, I can beat Shaw, that's easy, but Eriksen's even easier. there were quite a few times where Eriksson, who was supposed to be guarding Odegaard, and Odegaard would make that overlapping run, and Shaw would switch off and guarding to Odegaard instead, and that would force Eriksson to go back into Saka. So it happened a couple more times in the second half, and the other time Saka ended up hitting the post. So it seemed like he individually was able to pick his poison of who he wants to be able to get at. And it's kind of like in basketball where who do you want in the pick and roll? You bring the weakest defender, and he chose Eriksson. But even when there was that better defender, it seemed like he could eat him too. So overall, Saka, strong performance.
Yeah, and so obviously strong performance from him, but you mentioned as well, Odegaard, to start the game, it was a fast start to that game, and Odegaard was pulling the strings for everything. I think he had the most touches inside the first 20 minutes of that game, getting on the ball, dictating play. But really, you mentioned Saka, a player at the top of his game at the moment. You can argue as well, Marcus Rashford. I guess you can say against the run of play, 17 minutes in, out of really nothing, I guess an Arsenal giveaway, Bruno Fernandes picks up the ball, finds Rashford just inside the Arsenal midfield, inside the Arsenal half. He goes past Partey and then drives at that Arsenal back line, who's backpedaling, and then I think sort of uses Gabriel to hide where the shot goes, and he finds a good shot to beat Ramsdale. And at that point, you're thinking, yeah, this is exactly what Man U would have wanted. Let's see if they can hold this lead. But that didn't happen, Mac. 7 minutes later, Arsenal responded, and you said that was a great response from Arsenal with a header by Nketiah at the back post, courtesy of Granit Xhaka. So I guess walk us a little bit through, because you just talked about the strength that Arsenal have on the right-hand side with Saka and Odegaard and Ben White sometimes overlapping. On the other side, they don't lack any firepower there. What are your thoughts about Zinchenko, Xhaka, and Martinelli up there?
You brought it up perfectly. So first, in regards to that trio, Wan-Bissaka was very much staying on Martinelli, and it's tough. One-on-one, Wan-Bissaka is one of the best, I think, argue one-on-one defenders in the league. I know that a lot of Manchester United fans question his ability going forward. Fair. But defensively, you could not ask for anything better, and there's a couple challenges that were phenomenal. But what Martinelli did do is able to drag Wan-Bissaka out of position a couple different times, and that allowed players like Zinchenko, Xhaka to not just hit on the overlap, but sometimes the underlap as well, to create different triangles, different passing lanes for Odegaard to be able to fit passes through. And that's what happened on that play there, is that it was Martinelli, it was after a corner kick, Martinelli had tucked in, even though at this point Wan-Bissaka had shifted to play kind of on the left-hand side because it was just after a corner. What that trio was able to do in that positioning is that Zinchenko realized that there was space in the middle internally, cut into there, and then it ended up 2 passes later. Xhaka was on the overlap instead this time around. Similar, traditionally a fullback overlap really, and put a cross into Nketiah, who on the blind side of Wan-Bissaka was able to get a quick, easy tap in. So overall, that trio's been playing very, very well, where Arsenal, like I said, can pick your poison, where depending on the matchups, depending on who they were looking at, it's like, okay, maybe Martinelli 1-on-1 isn't the solution, but if we can overload that side, defensively, they're going to be very, very weak. And that was consistent for me, is that, yes, Rashford does give you a lot going forward, and Antony potentially as well, but defensively, both of them, they were not tracking back at all. It was always one-on-one situations out wide, and they didn't really kind of give the support out wide to their defenders. And that's how Arsenal were able to get at them. I do want to touch on the Rashford goal, though. That I think Manchester United's game plan is that they have two, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit later, but there isn't a set game plan of, here's a consistent ways that we're going to be able to create goals. It comes down to really two things, it seems like. It's either moments of brilliance or mistakes. There's not a, if we picture us, what is that Manchester United goal right now? What does that look like? Those are the only two ways that they're able to get it. And there are prime examples in this game. And it did almost get them across the line to at least get a point. But that moment of brilliance from Rashford, and of course later on with Martinez, even though there's progress, and you could argue there's a lot of progress in terms of from where they were at the beginning of the season to now, there isn't still that template. Hopefully it does come soon, but I feel like that's what's missing for them. But Rashford, great strike though. Gotta love to see it.
So yeah, let's quickly just go over that goal by Saka, so we can talk about a little bit what you just mentioned. Saka took Eriksson 1-on-1, kind of used him to, I guess, kind of block as well the shot that was coming in. I think a combination of McTominay and Odegaard as well kind of obstructed the view for De Gea, left him rooted in a spot. no chance for him. And you said very similarly, a couple minutes later, he had the same similar chance to that went off the post. So Saka on that right hand side, definitely a threat to any defense in the league. But on that note, the 59 minutes, 6 minutes after Arsenal scored the second, Man U are able to tie it up. And at the time, I was watching sort of what they would do in this scenario where they have Weghorst and McTominay, I think probably the two tallest players on the field. And both of them are kind of crowding the 6-yard box, which I thought was odd because I would expect them to be just hanging around the penalty spot. Maybe one or two of them are making a run off each other and trying to get on the end of that. Ball gets lofted in, and Ramsdale comes to claim it, but I guess the amount of bodies there, he's not able to collect it cleanly. I think you mentioned it was a communication error between him and Tomiyasu. Sandro Martinez able to loop his header in. I guess your thought on that, is that something communication error, or is there something more to that?
Definitely a communication error, because that's a simple goalkeeper claim. Definitely, he should have got a shot from Ramsdale. If he didn't, then you could argue that's Ramsdale's fault, or Tomiyasu's for not listening. So definitely communication, because he definitely had it in his grasp. It was tough though, because Tomiyasu did come on at halftime because Ben White had picked up a yellow card in the first half, and it was not just this moment. There's a moment I think it's a couple minutes later when it's 2-2, and then Rashford cuts in, and I think he goes between Tomiyasu's legs. And be able to get a shot off of Saliba, which Ramsdale makes a really good save off of. And that was the only Manchester United had a really clean chance, in my opinion. But it was really that right side. He came in, didn't look the greatest going against Rashford or 1-on-1. And in that moment, it definitely lacked confidence, or really be able to deal with it, or just to kind of listen, to be aware. But he didn't look great in his cameo for the second half overall. But you got to give full credit to Martinez, where he stuck with it. That position from that far out, to be able to loop a header like that, that's still very, very impressive. So you got to be Johnny on the spot to be able to take those chances when they are available. And he was there, and he did it. And put himself, even though Gabriel was on the line trying to stop it, there was no shot. It was very well placed given his position. So definitely a tough header for him to still even equalize, given even though there was a mistake on Arsenal's side.
Yeah, so guys, always, if you're a striker out there listening, always be ready for that. And even though the looping header looks a little bit odd at first instance, it was great placement and great execution to get that in. But like we mentioned, Arsenal still getting the better chances. The De Gea save on Nketiah really stands out. But at that point, we thought it might end up 2-2. It would have been, I think, points dropped for Arsenal, and I think Man U would have been happy with a point away at Arsenal. But again, nice piece of build-up down the left-hand side with a player who Arsenal have just signed, Leandro Trossard, who I think impressed, though he only came on for not too long.
Yeah, less than 10 minutes, if I remember correctly.
Right. And he plays in Zinchenko. His cutback to Odegaard is really the pinnacle of what created this goal, because his shot is sort of deflected, but Nketiah is there to put it in from 6 yards. And even though VAR reviews it for offside, it was rightly given. And at that point, Arsenal fans delirious inside the stadium, and rightfully so. They get the winner to continue that run of form, which they are still 5 points ahead of City. But I think this result against, like I said, our Man U are in a great run of form, really continues their sort of title push at this point. So what does this mean for Arsenal, Mac? What do you think?
I think this puts them, squarely on a sound footing with City to be able to come out as title favorites. Let's say if Arsenal did drop points and did lose this game, I think they would come into a Manchester City tie with more so of a heavy underdog to be able to come out with the win. But now I think you can really look at it as, you know what, they're in with the fair shout. I'll say 50-50 odds between the two of them who could end up winning the title. Arsenal do have a little bit of an edge, but you could argue City still have a little bit more depth and talent. So if Arsenal do pick up injuries, that may potentially help close the gap. So I think this puts them in, they were in the conversation, but more so kind of heavier underdogs. Now I feel like this puts them in the mentality with, hey, we've beaten our toughest match of the year in year out at Spurs. We come away with the win. the only other team that actually has beat us this entire year in the Premier League, we ended up coming back and beating them, and not just beating them. I would say, given the scoreline, that it may seem a little bit unfair to say, but I think it's fair to say, absolutely battered Manchester United. They had 63 touches in the opposing half, which is the most in the entire Premier League thus far this season. So they were absolutely dominant in all the key areas. And even though they edged this result, if you look at it performance-wise, they checked up almost every single box. So for me, it only further elevates their confidence in terms of being able to carry out a title challenge for the season.
Yeah, as you mentioned, great result, and even though, they were definitely better than Man U on this day. Let's look at it on the Man U side. You said, apart from individual brilliance or set pieces, Man U still haven't really found, I guess, in the last two games, comfortable ways to score, I guess, against opposition in the top 6, I would argue. Because obviously, with the quality that they have, they should be winning against teams on the bottom half of the table. But I guess one of the things that I did want to point out, though, is Whitehurst did start the game, and I think he almost finished the game, if I'm not mistaken. And the likes of, basically, Man U don't have as many subs as they would want at this point. And very much, I guess, similar to what Arsenal have gone through a couple of seasons ago. They are, you could argue, in a change period where this is supposed to be, I guess, a write-off season, which it showed today. In yesterday's game, they aren't at that quality yet. What do you think, I guess, for Man U going forward, they should realistically look at themselves to do this season?
I think if they finished in the top 4, this should be titled as a majorly successful initial year for Ten Hag. They are in a transitional period right now, going between and trying to set a level of standard amongst their club of here's the bare minimum everyone needs to do. If you don't meet this, you're gone. And I think that's very, very important to be able to do, because that should kind of lift. I think it's rising tide lifts all ships. That'll put a level of standard where everyone knows here's our job day in, day out. Here's kind of the work ethic we need to do. Here's our certain play style we have to try to attain to be. And then we attract players that want to play in that system and be successful in that system. I think that's where they are now. They're very much in the early stage. And if in doing that, they finish in the top 4, that's massively ahead of expectations for them, in my opinion. Going into the season, I thought they would be fortunate if they finished within the top 6. So if they even finished within the top 4, that's much more than I thought they could have potentially have done. I think the key part, though, is what they don't want to do is get ahead of themselves, where they have the expectations like, hey, because we're at these level of points, we're in the top 4, I could look at Manchester United having a better year next year and not being in the top 4 because they're more productive, because they have more attacking threat, because they have much more options, right? They're fortunate to be in the position they are, considering how other teams are floundering around them. But I think the key part is to set that level of standard to be able to go forward from there. Because in this individual game against a big team, I understand you just ended up beating City in a matchup earlier a couple weeks ago, but you had an expected goals of 0.3. You had a total of 6 shots. For any Manchester United team in history, that's a large disappointment, and you're looking at yourselves poorly. But I think what this has shown is that there is that level of standard, which I think is key for them.
Yeah, for sure. We'll keep watching that, and we'll definitely be touching up on our sort of preseason predictions in some upcoming podcasts. So definitely stay tuned for those. So let's talk about now, I guess, our title rivals, Man City. They took on Wolves and won 3-0 in this game. Interesting to note, City started with, I guess you can call it a back 4 with Lewis, Stones, Akanji, and Laporte. But it was essentially Lewis and Rodri as the 2 pivots, which we have seen more and more this season to sort of dominate that midfield and possession-wise. Man City, this scoreline does show how effective Man City is and the way that they play with that counter press. really giving them the chance to win the ball back high up the field and created chances. Haaland created one where the ball was given away and Kevin De Bruyne puts him in within 20 minutes. He unfortunately is not able to score that one, but you can see this is coming. And so that being said, Haaland getting his chances and goals, 3 goals in the span of 15 minutes with the halftime break in between. All you really need for that. So, Mac, what did you think about this Man City performance?
I thought they still haven't hit great performance overall. Of course, having a hat trick for Haaland, he's at 25 goals I think now in the Premier League,
something like that.
And so that's he's already a couple over what has typically won the kind of the Golden Boot the last several seasons. So,
right,
phenomenally impressive from him individually, but collectively as a team, they still weren't kind of firing on all cylinders. In my opinion, there wasn't as many other players getting individual chances other than Haaland. Mars had one towards the end of the game. He ended up being offside, if I remember correctly, which he ended up scoring on. But overall, from City, it's good that they got back on a winning record. They were able to put a heavy scoreline. Haaland was able to kind of silence people because it was getting to the point where the conversation was around him, I think, very unfair, where, are they worse with him now that he's here versus last season without him? They could have been better. I think that's a really it's a poor conversation and not really accurate whatsoever. But it definitely it's good for them to be able to get back on the winning side. But I still think that there is another level or two that they can reach. If they were going to be kind of getting back into or overtaking Arsenal for the title challenge this year.
Yeah. On that note, just wanted to say, hey, Haaland has surpassed all expectations. In a year where, I think, was it last year or 2 years ago, where Grealish signed for City, he didn't really start that many games. And there is always a period of time, whether you come into this City team or Liverpool's Klopp's Liverpool team, there's a sort of period of getting used to how they play. Haaland hit the ground running, but there might be a time now, what we've seen in the last couple of weeks, where he might just be getting used to it and things are catching up. But without a doubt, him being there and being an offensive threat is definitely a benefit to the City team. So it will be interesting to see how they perform and what this title challenge will mean for both Arsenal and City. So, Mac, I guess at this point, let's quickly take a break, and then we'll be back reviewing the remaining games of the Premier League. So stay with us. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We are going to continue our review of match week 21 of the Premier League with a not so exciting game. Liverpool 0, Chelsea 0. This game, we touched on it. We were really not sure what was going to happen in this game. I guess just to start off on the Liverpool end, the lineup was interesting. James Milner started at right back. Konate and Joe Gomez started as the center backs, with Andrew Robertson on the left hand side. But Basetic did get a start ahead of Fabinho, which I was wrong. I thought Klopp was going to stick with Fabinho. And Harvey Elliott started as the left winger. So that was interesting. On the flip side, Conor Gallagher, Lewis Hall, Badiashile get starts for Chelsea, and as well as Hakim Ziyech. So a game where a lot of players are coming in for minutes that they haven't really played in a lot this season. So I think we would have expected a lot of chaos, but it ended up being 0-0. I think fair result in the end, but what did you think about that game, Mac?
This game was the definition of cheeks. Like the fact that it was, for us living in Canada, I was up at 7:30 in the morning watching this game, wishing I was anywhere else but in the world at the moment. And I kept watching, waiting for something, but literally nothing. I think, and the worst part for me, the brightest part for either team in the entire game was Mudryk coming on for Chelsea, which obviously wasn't great to see. I'll be honest, I was like, damn, he looked good. He looked good. He looked quick. It seemed like he has a goal threat, was probably the most likely to score from anyone on either team, which is sad to say, considering he hasn't played since before the World Cup in a league game. So supposedly, if this is him out of shape, or lacking match fitness, as Pep Guardiola would say, it's not great. It's not great. It does hurt. But overall, this game kind of really epitomizes both teams' season. Is that defensively, I'd argue Liverpool more so than Chelsea were a little bit of a mess. Could have conceded a couple of goals, but Chelsea at the same time can't finish. And in the final third, I would argue make poor decisions. Like one time, I think it was like early in the first half, Mount had a chance. It was cut back to him by Havertz, and instead of trying to take his man and just shuffle to the side, take a shot, he passes it off to Hall, to the left wing, to lower their expected goals by how much of a percentage. It's both teams. This game epitomized both their seasons, and it was fair because they're both in such a deplorable state that they shared the points. So overall, I felt like it was a perfect encapsulation of both teams.
Definitely. That really just shows the lack of confidence that they have going forward. Cody Gakpo on the other end gets 2 half chances, but really not a shot on target from him, I think, in this game at all. So it encapsulates sort of how both teams are finding the season so far. A couple of bright spots, like you did mention, Modric, which we'll touch on in a little bit, but I wanted to just mention Badiashile as well. He is one of the many signings that Chelsea have had in the January transfer window, and he looked pretty decent on the ball. And so 21 years old, him and Wesley Fofana, who I think is still coming back from injury, could be interesting going forward as the center back pairing for Chelsea. Now, obviously, Mudryk, like you said, was the bright spot in the game. He came on and looked like most likely player to create something in this game, which of course was going to come with a James Milner professional foul, taking him out just a few minutes with him within his debut. But that didn't really stop him. That he continued being a bright spot, and if he continues this way in those couple minutes that he got, that could be a positive for Chelsea. And if Reece James comes back on the right-hand side, they look a little more balanced in terms of going forward. But again, that goal-scoring threat up front is still questionable, and so we'll have to see what that means. You did mention it. Liverpool looked like the team most likely to concede, and so I think, as a Liverpool fan, I am very happy with the result. I think Chelsea might feel a little bit disappointed, but I think Graham Potter was also happy with the result, given the run of form that they have had. But what do you think about Chelsea? Does this sort of give Potter a little bit of an idea of what he wants to do, or is it still unquestionable what he's going to do?
Highly questionable. I feel like he needs to at least show something for the second half of the season. Otherwise, he might have a quick exit out the door by Todd Bowley in the summer, in my opinion. Because, again, they're spending an obscene amount of money, so the expectations have to be high. Of course, I could understand why, looking at the table now, looking where they are, you can't expect your manager to put you back in within top 4 by the end of the season. I feel like that would be quite a miracle. Not impossible, but a miracle. Crazier things have happened. But overall, you want to see, kind of set the standards a la Manchester United, where these are the expectations, this is the system that we're trying to play to be able to create opportunities. The tough part is I feel like they're still lacking a couple of pieces to be able to do that in key areas. And it's scary to say that because they've signed so many goddamn players, right? Where they, as you highlighted, they don't really have a number 9. Havertz is not that. I don't think long-term that's his best position. Their midfield is aging out. They don't have reinforcements there. But I would argue outside of that, wide back positions, winger positions, or goalkeeper positions, they're flush with talent, theoretically. It's just about, if we bring in 1 or 2 more pieces in those key areas, will this take us over the edge where we're back to where we would be? We're back in that title, that top 4 contention year in, year out. But I still don't see that yet. Because, again, the players that they've signed, Badiashile, Mudryk, I would argue those were getting to the point where they're their best areas on the pitch already. So I don't know how many more reinforcements you really need there, because what happens? How do you get the game plan going forward? How do you play Mount, Havertz, Mudryk, Sterling, and Ziyech all in a front 5, out front attacking? How do you fit them all on the pitch? You can't. Aubameyang's probably going to be gone. Gallagher, I assume, will probably be gone. players like that, even if you take those out the door, I don't see a way that you can fit them on the pitch or play a system where they're exchangeable, where, okay, if we take one out, yeah, this might bring us a different attacking threat, but I think for them, they don't play, for them to be successful, it's not the same system. It changes too drastically, where I feel like that's impossible to ingrain in a team where, oh, we just change in one player and we're going to completely change everything that we do and everything that we're about. So I still think they have a long way to go, but it is positives that at least their most recent signings seem to have done well so far.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have the rest of the season to see how Chelsea does with their signings, and as well Liverpool, to see how, I guess, Klopp can turn the season around, if that is possible. But just to round off this part of this game, I just wanted to read out a quote I found funny that I found. It was a snap of Liverpool in 8th, Brentford in 9th, and Chelsea in 10th, all tied on 29 points before their game this weekend. And the quote was 18 points off the top of the table. And one Brentford fan replied saying, "Hey, it's only our second season. Give us a break." So it shows you where both teams are, Chelsea and Liverpool, that yes, Brentford have had a pretty decent season, but they are at the same spot as Brentford. No offense to any Brentford fans, just this is the state that Chelsea and Liverpool find themselves in.
Absolutely, definitely. It's. But I think I want, before we move on to a different game, I love that, hilarious. That's why Twitter, because I assume you got that off Twitter. Always takes the cake. Always takes the cake. Always has the goodness that you need. As soon as a game finished, go straight to Twitter trending sports. And then then you'll be able to enjoy the next couple hours. I do think that Liverpool, it's interesting because they've added a lot of attacking pieces. Gakpo, Nunez. I think I saw a stat where their 9 goals against Brentford, funny to talk about it, I think was like 18% of the total goals that they scored this season. Something like that, where it's, if you take that out and you kind of look at their goal tallies, it's for so many attacking players, really are not getting really any goals out of them. So I think that's the rest of the season. You could argue, defensively they haven't looked great because that kind of leads to that, or midfield wise, there's not enough reinforcement and that leads to that. But I feel like for them, it was more so they need to kind of get that figured out first, because if you don't score, you won't win. And right now they're not scoring enough. So as well as, scary enough, not looking great defensively. So there's a lot to work on for both teams there. But I think that's my concern more so with Liverpool is the lack of goals, really. That's what's
great point. Great point. No goals in the last 2 Premier League games, obviously against Brighton when they lost, and this game now against Chelsea, which was 0-0. So that's something that has to change if Liverpool are looking to challenge for any European position. So let's move on to another team, I guess, in the competition for European position.
Sorry, just to jump in, to correct myself, it's 26% of their goals where I get for that Brentford game. Sorry. My apologies. Go ahead to the next game.
Just had to stick the knife in and turn it.
Yep.
It's all good. It's all good. Now we're going to talk about Fulham 0, Tottenham 1, game that took place today at the time of recording. Not sure how much you were able to see of that game, Mac, but interesting to note that Bentancur did return and help Spurs look a little more balanced in midfield. Mitrovic also returned for Fulham, and Fulham has been the story for Spurs this whole season. They've been conceding a lot of chances early on, and Fulham had their chances through Decordova-Reid and Harrison Reed, both of them having chances, clear chances in the first half. Game is played out, though, towards the end of the half, where Harry Kane collects the ball from Son, who had turned the Fulham midfield and was running at them. He takes a nice touch across the face of the goal, shielding his defender, and puts in a nice shot far post to beat the Fulham goalkeeper Bernd Leno. That equals him with Jimmy Greaves' record for 266 goals for Spurs. So he's now tied on goals for all-time Tottenham players. So, Mac, what were your thoughts on this game?
It was very much more stereotypical Tottenham. For the first half, they didn't have much juice going forward. There wasn't really any creativity, and Fulham looked like the team in the ascendancy. And I feel like if you're a Fulham fan, you want to come out of that first half with at least a goal, because you know in the second half that could really change for Spurs, where if they're not performing well in the first half, Conte really comes into halftime, slaps their ass, and then they get out to play in the second half, which is what happened. Second half on, it really felt like Tottenham were the more threatening team. They had a couple of chances. Harry Kane did get his goal, of course, but I would feel a little bit hard done in terms of Fulham, where they couldn't kind of finish that final touch in that first half, where Mitrovic couldn't kind of latch onto a kind of a cross, where maybe Willian couldn't take somebody 1-on-1 and score or create for someone else, where they kind of had half chances and none of their bounces went their way. But the one chance I feel like that did hit the target, if I recall correctly. I forgot who went off, but it kind of was a header off across from the right-hand side, and it was directly at Hugo Lloris, and that was really their only, I'll say, grade A chance, if I remember correctly. But not outstanding, which is disappointing, because for a Fulham team, you've done very well thus far this season in regards of points totals. You were on a 4-game winning streak in the last prior to entering this game, so overall you've been playing very, very well. But I would feel disappointed not to come out with something, given how poorly Tottenham have played recently. Sorry, Fulham did lose the last game prior to this one, but prior to that, 4 wins in a row, and now 2 games losing in a row.
Yeah, that's how quickly things change in the league. And they looked really good, especially against Chelsea. That game just comes to mind. Their midfield was great. I think it was Paulinho who had that chance that you're referring to, but
yes.
Him being a great bright spot for Fulham this season. Obviously, Willian coming in with that offensive threat that he will always produce, and Mitrovic, you can't really count him out for scoring. So it is a miss for Fulham to overtake Spurs in terms of points, but I think it just shows the quality in the league, where Tottenham, who have had a up and down season, continue to get a result away from home, and this again puts them back into the contention of top 4, just 3 points with an extra game played on Man U, but still 3 points behind them in top 4. So it'll be interesting to see how they play out the rest of their season, given the fact that I don't think they've had any real signings, and Conte had been calling out for some signings and some help when they're going through that run of games where they weren't really getting the best results. And so we'll definitely keep an eye out on how they do. I guess, Mac, for you, anything about Spurs, given the fact that Kane's still been performing, but Son hasn't been up to standard. Kulusevski's been a decent bright spot, but Richarlison hasn't really featured as much, and I don't think has a league goal yet. So what are your thoughts on them overall?
I'm still concerned, because their next match game is against Manchester City, and City still needs to be able to pull out results to have to catch up to Arsenal. So even though, yes, this may alleviate some of the stress, some of the pressure right now, they're really out of the frying pan and into the fire, potentially going against Man City in such a short turn. So I would be concerned for them, because if Manchester United are able to kind of separate points from between the two teams, even though Tottenham at the end of the season had kind of a charge to come back and kind of catch Arsenal, I feel like Man U or even Newcastle really might be a different type of animal to be able to chase down. And if they don't have the correct reinforcements brought in, they might not be able to pull a rabbit out of a hat again this year. So I am concerned for Tottenham. It's not fire alarms, house is burning down, like the dog in house, everything is fine meme. But
yeah.
But I still do feel concerned. And if they, again, hey, Spurs, this is your second chance to gain some favor with the Arsenal fans. Let's see what you can do. Let's see something here from you boys. And help our title chances, please. We would appreciate it. At least one of us got to get a trophy sometime soon. May as well be us, right? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely see what Spurs can do. We'll cover that in our upcoming podcasts down the road as well. But on that note, let's take a quick last break here, and then we'll be back covering the remaining games from this weekend. So stay with us. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We are going to finish off the podcast for today, just touching on a couple of the important games, remaining games that took place in this match week 21 of the Premier League. The first one, West Ham 2, Everton 0, and time of recording, it has been confirmed that Frank Lampard has managed his last game for Everton. A quote from our boy Fabrizio Romano, simply put, Frank Lampard has been sacked by the club as expected. Official club statement to follow. And it's interesting, the choice of words, as expected, because obviously Lampard and Everton haven't had the best run of form. And against you would argue, a struggling side down there with West Ham, comfortably beaten, I think, in this game. And so props to Jared Bowen and West Ham. But what were your thoughts about Everton, Mac? And I guess give some thoughts about how they can possibly turn things around.
So for one, it's going to be very, very tough for them to be able to turn things around. I think if I saw the stat correctly, is that Everton right now only have 5 players that have scored 10 or more Premier League goals in their career. So overall, in terms of kind of expectations of a goal threat, which is really what they're lacking. Defensively, there's been a lot of times throughout the season that they have been solid. I would argue they have a great back line, a very solid goalkeeper, but the creativity, the offensive threat, it's there's not anything really there. So it's tough to say, okay, you fire Lampard, you're bringing in a different manager, maybe you'll get an uptick in terms of performance from the team, a little bit more effort, but there's no pedigree in terms of kind of a goal-scoring threat on the team. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, yes, he's back playing now. He's only played 13 matches of their 20 so far this season, I think. So cool, that's great. But he hasn't been at his best. He's only scored 1 league goal, and other than him, I don't see much else in terms of kind of that consistent threat. They have a couple of young players. Again, it's unless they not just make a managerial change, they bring in players that can kind of give them an opportunity, a platform where they don't have to win every game 1-0. I think that's the only way they can kind of dig themselves out of the hole that they themselves created, because I think in terms of activity-wise of the last 10 years, they're not in the bottom half in terms of money spent, in terms of player group, in terms of quality of names. It's been mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake. So they should turn around given the kind of the standing of the club, but I feel like this year is going to be much, much, much tougher than it was even last year.
Yeah, for sure. And just listening to other podcasts and seeing what the reactions are, and you can see it's not just the team. The team is not great, but could be a team that should comfortably stay in the Premier League. Lampard, not the greatest manager, but he has managed in the Premier League. But a lot of fans are obviously upset with the ownership, and so if all 3 things are questionable, it really shows you what state the club are in, and shows how bad the situation has gotten. Where, yeah, they are still not the last place team, but they are tied on points with the last place team, Southampton, who also lost this weekend as well. But you're looking at the likes of West Ham, Wolves, Leeds, who are just above them. But if you think about it, them losing a manager now, I think they have Arsenal next in the league. Not going to pick up a result there. And so it's going to come quick. And so something definitely had to change. And with this managerial change, hopefully their, I guess, realistic expectation and hope is to at least stay and then see how things fall in the next season and try to regroup from there. But on the flip side, Mac, is this a sort of starting point for West Ham to sort of kick on and hopefully get into that middle pack of the table?
Absolutely. I definitely feel like this could be a platform to be able to build going forward. Their next match day in the Premier League is not till February, so you still have some time there. So they will be able to kind of recover a little bit on that side, and it's against Newcastle. That's a tough opposition to follow up a good performance, but it's good to see a player like Jared Bowen get back on the score sheet. A couple other players looked a threat. Antonio looked very, very lively. And in terms of the quality and the names on the pitch, overall, you expect a lot more. So taking points like this to move back in the conversation where hopefully by the end of the season, they're towards that mid-table position as a minimum and go forward from there. And even listening to David Moyes after the game, he was talking about yeah, the board, everyone's behind me. There's no problems here. He was never tense, worried, stressed whatsoever. They 100% are all in on him as an individual. And he more so was just concerned and worried about Everton, considering how much he still cares about kind of the team, the club, the area. So you can just see that they're not that they're looking past Everton in a way in terms of they need the points, but they're secure enough in the position and the quality that they know by the end of the season, they'll kind of get where they should be at least being back to, and then hopefully be able to kick on from there. So I think this is a good kind of a platform to build off of.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll see what happens with these two teams respectively. The next game we're going to quickly touch on is Crystal Palace 0, Newcastle 0, and we previewed this game actually, funnily enough, in our previous podcast, and you pointed it out, Mac. They had played, I think, 3 0-0 ties so far this season, and they just added to another one. Not the most exciting game in terms of goal and goal chances. I watched periods of this game, and all I could see every time I glanced at the screen was a Newcastle corner kick. So, again, one of the things I think they're going to struggle with is, that I think they're going to look to address in the coming transfer windows is try to find players that can unlock defenses from other parts of the field that are not set pieces or overloads, and relying on Almiron or Saint Maximin. They have brilliant moments, but obviously they want something more consistent moving forward. And Crystal Palace getting that result at home, continuing to sort of stay in sort of that middle pack of the table. What were your overall thoughts of this game, Mac?
Again, in terms of what you highlighted about the 0-0 result, I'm not surprised, because both teams can be very strong defensively, and unfortunately Jordan Ayew played for Crystal Palace, so that's pretty much my just kidding. But overall, Newcastle, they're the team obviously that interests me a little bit more here because they do have more European odds per se. They do need to figure out if Almiron's not scoring every week, how else are they scoring goals outside of set pieces, as we highlighted, right? Defensively, best team in the league, bar none. Very, very, very good goalkeeper, very strong back four, positionally, aerially. The midfield three, Joe Linton, Longstaff, and Bruno Guimaraes, all quality players to help provide coverage there. But going forward, they still have a lot of questions where I don't know if you're playing Joe Willock on a wing or week in, week out, that's really the answer to ways to be able to create opportunities. They did just let Chris Wood go on loan to, I think you said Nottingham Forest when we were talking about previous podcast. Yep. Does this open up financial room for them to be able to bring in a different attacking player? I think that's what they'll need to do in this January window. Because yes, defense is great, that's fun, but Almagad is not ever present. You do need a little bit more coverage there, where you can be, because now what a lot of teams are doing is overloading that the Newcastle right hand side. So their defensive side, left hand side, we're making sure, okay, we're going to be on our assignment here, we're providing the extra coverage here. But when the ball switches over to the other side, I'm sorry, but Joe Linton, Joe Willock, and a Dan Burn overlap is not scaring me. So you do want a little bit more of a threat out there, and even if Callum Wilson, who on his day can be very, very influential, but he's oftenly injured, and Isak is new to the Premier League. So now that Wood's gone, I would argue to their benefit because it does create that room. You want more attacking options there. So I think for them, it's not, again, similar. It's not your alarm bells. You're not even greatly concerned, but I think you do need to do something.
Yeah. On that note, it is funny to note Newcastle are on a 15 league game unbeaten run. The last time they lost that late goal against Liverpool, but 11 goals conceded so far this season is, I think, quite outstanding. The level of quality they have defensively, fewest goals in the league, even fewer goals than Arsenal, who are at the top of the league, stands out for most observers. So will be fun to note, to see if they can turn things around in the offensive end, and to see if they can close off the season with some European spot competition. So I guess last game we're going to quickly touch on is Leicester 2, Brighton 2. Mac, this game, I think you were a little more invested in than I am, but so let me get your thoughts on this game.
I think one, Brighton were very unfortunate not to come away with all 3 points. They had a penalty shout. I forgot what time of the game it was, but they should have got a penalty. VAR didn't overturn that, and that was kind of a blatant and obvious one, in my opinion. Should have gone back and got it reworked. Matoma is really kind of what's the term I'm looking for? Niche, kind of cool kid. Like everyone that's really kind of, I was trying to say that they're savvy to the Premier League. He's like, Batoma's my new favorite player, right? Now they're jumping on his bandwagon now because he's playing phenomenally well and has been a huge, massive bright spot for Brighton. And they definitely should have got something out of this game, more out of this game. On the other side for Leicester, they did play well for some portions of the game. They did score 2 goals. They didn't concede as many. So there is life there. So I think now they're in a position where they're not as bad as they were at the beginning of the season, and that's great. But I feel like they've not where they've been, aside from last year, previous years of that, they're not anywhere near close to that level. So they're still, I think they're trying to find themselves as kind of a consistent threat in the Premier League. But right now, I feel like they have to settle towards that mid to lower table team because there's still some areas they need to work on. Because you can see the lack of confidence. They're up 2-1. And what you would want to do towards the end of the game is, yes, you may want to sit back, try to be able to make sure that you don't concede the last couple of minutes of the game, etc. But how you don't concede is not just by defending; it's also by keeping the ball in the other team's half. And you can see Jamie Vardy inside his own box at that moment with a 2-1 lead. In his heyday, you would never see him there. He would never come anywhere near there. He is hugging the last shoulder of the last defender through all 90 minutes because as soon as that long ball comes, at least there's someone applying pressure, an outlet, and if he's able to get him in possession, score on a counter, or at least take it to the corner. So you can see that they're still lacking confidence and not where they want to be, but they're not as bad as they were, of course, at the beginning of the season. So I think Leicester would be much happier with the picked up point, and Brighton, to how well they played thus far this season, would be disappointed with the result.
Yeah, on that note, very interesting. I think this will probably be Jamie Vardy's last season, which a great servant to the club, but like you said, not something that we're used to seeing. Jamie Vardy not on the last shoulder, the defender of the last shoulder. So, hey, it's been great. Leicester will probably just stay in the Premier League, and hopefully, whether Brendan Rodgers stays or whoever comes in, gets a chance to rebuild with some much needed investment. So we'll see how they play out the remaining of the season. And on that note, we're going to read out the remaining results. Southampton 0, Aston Villa 1, Bournemouth 1, Nottingham Forest 1, and Leeds Brentford tied 0-0. So this concludes our podcast for today. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. Our handle is at @house_40. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, feel free to get in touch with us via email. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The next time you hear from us will be Friday when we look back at our predictions at the beginning of the season and sort of grade ourselves on how well or not well those went. But on that note, Mac, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Happy Lunar New Year to everyone.
Yes, for sure. And with Gio not being here, I just wanted to read out a quick quote that Mikel Arteta gave after he was asked about that yellow card, and he said, "You can always get better in life, in it." So on that note, Man U, you can always get better in life, and so we'll catch you in our next podcast. Have a good night.